Arthur Vance had a net worth of $42 billion. He could buy islands, topple governments, and silence the press with a single phone call. But there was one thing on this earth the great Arthur Vance could not control: his 10-year-old daughter Chloe. They called her the unbreakable brat of the Upper East Side. She had chewed up and spit out 12 professional governesses in 6 months. She was a hurricane in designer silk. No one could handle her. No one dared to try. Until one rainy Tuesday, inside a struggling French bistro, a waitress named Sarah Miller did the impossible. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She did one simple thing that changed the history of the Vance Empire forever. This is the story of the hidden power of the Invisible Woman. New York City, October 14th, 2023. The rain was hammering against the glass windows of Le Petit Jardin, a mid-tier French bistro on 64th Street that was trying too hard to be high-end and failing miserably. The air inside smelled of damp coats and burnt garlic butter. Sarah Miller, 26 years old, adjusted her apron in the reflection of the brass espresso machine. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of drugstore concealer could hide. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe bun, complying with the strict dress code enforced by her manager, Mr. Henderson, a man whose pettiness was inversely proportional to the restaurant's success. "Table 4 needs water. Sarah." "Move your feet," Henderson barked, snapping his fingers near her ear. Sarah didn't flinch. She was used to it. She grabbed the pitcher, her knuckles white. She needed this job. Her younger brother Toby was sitting in a specialized care facility in Queens, and the bills were mounting faster than she could count. Every tip mattered. Every extra shift kept the wolves at bay. For one more day. The bell above the door jingled, not with a polite chime, but with an aggressive rattle as the door was shoved open. The restaurant went silent. It was a strange phenomenon, the way the oxygen seemed to get sucked out of a room when real power entered. Walking in first were 2 men in black suits, security. They scanned the bistro with cold, dead eyes. Then he entered. Arthur Vance, the tech mogul, the man who practically owned the cloud infrastructure of the Western world. He looked exhausted. His tie loosened his suit, costing more than the restaurant's annual lease. But the terror wasn't Arthur. It was the small figure trailing behind him, clutching a tablet and dragging a fur-lined coat on the wet floor. Chloe Vance, 10 years old. She looked like a porcelain doll, but the staff at Le Petit Jardin knew better. The Vances had been banned from the plaza and Cipriani for behavioral incidents. They were running out of places to eat. "Table for 2, Arthur said, his voice gravelly. "Somewhere quiet." "Right away, Mr. Vance," Henderson squeaked, practically tripping over himself. He shot a panicked look at Sarah. "Sarah, the VIP section. Now." Sarah felt a knot of dread in her stomach. She had read the tabloids. Chloe Vance bites nanny. Chloe Vance throws $5,000 vols at charity gala. She guided them to the corner booth. Arthur sat down heavily, burying his face in his phone immediately. Chloe climbed onto the banquette, leaving her muddy boots on the velvet seat. She glared at Sarah. "I want the spaghetti," Chloe announced. Her voice wasn't a child's voice. It was imperious cold. "But not the red kind, the white kind. And if there is a single piece of green stuff in it, I will scream." "Carbonara, no parsley," Sarah noted on her pad. "And for you, sir, Scotch, double Neat, Arthur muttered without looking up. The next 20 minutes were a ticking time bomb. The kitchen was on high alert. The chef Marco was sweating profusely as he picked every speck of parsley out of the pasta with tweezers. When Sarah brought the plate out, she moved with the grace of a bomb disposal technician. She placed the steaming bowl in front of the girl. "Enjoy," Sarah said softly. Chloe stared at the pasta. She picked up her fork, twirled a mound of noodles, and lifted it to her nose. She sniffed it. Then she looked Sarah dead in the eye. "It smells like poor people," Chloe said. The restaurant was quiet enough that 3 tables heard it. Arthur Vance sighed, rubbing his temples, but he didn't correct her. He was too tired to fight. "Chloe, just eat," Arthur mumbled. "No," Chloe snapped. "I want pizza." "We don't serve pizza, miss," Sarah said politely. "But the bread is fresh baked and—" Clang! Chloe shoved the bowl. It flew off the table, crashing onto the tile floor. Creamy sauce splattered across Sarah's black trousers and worn-out shoes. The ceramic shattered loudly. "I said," Chloe screamed, her face turning red, "I want pizza!" Arthur slammed his hand on the table. "Chloe, that is enough. You hate me!" Chloe shrieked, standing up on the booth seat. "You just want to look at your phone. I hate you. I hate this place. It stinks!" She grabbed the glass of water Sarah had just refilled and hurled it. It missed Sarah's head by an inch and shattered against the wall behind her. Henderson, the manager, came running over, his face pale. "Mr. Vance, please, perhaps we can—" "Shut up!" Chloe yelled at the manager. "You look like a rat." It was chaos. Diners were filming with their phones. Arthur Vance looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. He reached for his wallet, pulling out a black credit card. "I'll pay for the damage. We're leaving." "No." Chloe stomped her foot. "I'm not moving until I get pizza." This was the moment. The moment where usually the staff would cower, the father would bribe the child, and the cycle would continue. But Sarah Miller looked down at her ruined shoes. Those shoes cost $40. It would take her 3 shifts to replace them. She thought of Toby in the hospital waiting for her visit, waiting for the special book she had promised to buy him. Something inside Sarah snapped, not a hot snap of anger, but a cold, hard click of resolve. She stepped forward, bypassing the trembling manager. "Pick it up," Sarah said. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, resonant tone that cut through the girl's screaming like a razor through silk. Arthur froze. Henderson gasped. "Sarah, are you insane? Get back to the kitchen." Sarah ignored him. She locked eyes with Chloe Vance. She didn't look at her like a waitress looking at a customer. She looked at her like a general looking at a soldier. "I said," Sarah repeated, her voice dropping an octave completely devoid of emotion. "Pick it up." Chloe stopped screaming. She blinked, genuinely confused. No one spoke to her like that. Adults yelled or they pleaded. They never just commanded. "You can't tell me what to do," Chloe sneered, though her voice wavered slightly. "My dad owns this building." "I don't care if your dad owns God," Sarah said, stepping closer. She towered over the booth. "You made a mess. You disrespected my workspace, and now you are going to clean it up." Arthur Vance looked up from his wallet, his eyes widening. He watched the waitress. He saw something in her posture, the way she held her shoulders, the perfect stillness of her hands. It was familiar. It was terrifying. "Fire her!" Chloe screamed at her father. "Daddy, fire her! She's being mean!" Sarah didn't flinch. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a clean white napkin. and dropped it on the floor, right over the pile of pasta. "The sauce is staining the grout," Sarah said, her voice sounding bored, unimpressed. "If you start now, you might save the floor. If you don't, you'll be sitting in that mess until closing time. Because I am not cleaning it. He is not cleaning it." She pointed to Henderson. "And your father is certainly not cleaning it." "I'm leaving," Chloe bluffed, moving to jump down. Sarah moved, fast. She didn't touch the girl, but she stepped into the exit path, blocking the booth with a dominance that was palpable. "You aren't leaving," Sarah whispered. "You're tantruming, and tantrums don't open doors. Manners do." The silence stretched for 10 agonizing seconds. The entire restaurant held its breath. Chloe looked at her father. Arthur didn't move. He was staring at Sarah with intense fascination. Chloe looked at the napkin, then back at Sarah's stone-cold face. The little girl realized, perhaps for the first time in her life, that the person in front of her was not afraid of her. Slowly, shakily, Chloe Vance slid off the booth. She knelt on the dirty floor. She picked up the napkin, and she began to wipe. The next morning, the video had gone viral before Sarah even finished her shift. #Billionaire brat. Humbled was trending on Twitter. The angle was grainy, shot from table 7, but the audio was crisp. "Pick it up." Sarah sat in her tiny studio apartment in Queens, staring at the screen of her cracked iPhone. She felt sick. She had lost her job, of course. Henderson had fired her the second the Vances walked out the door, terrified of a lawsuit. "You humiliated a billionaire's daughter," Henderson had screamed. "Get your things and get out." Now she was unemployed. Rent was due in 4 days. Toby's facility fees were due in 6. She put her head in her hands. "Stupid Sarah, stupid. You couldn't just keep your mouth shut." But she couldn't have. Watching that girl, that entitled, lost, angry little girl, had triggered something deep in Sarah's past. A past she had buried under aprons and fake smiles for 3 years. A sharp knock on her door made her jump. Sarah froze. Nobody visited her. She didn't have friends over. She owed no money to loan sharks. She walked to the door and peered through the peephole. Standing in her dingy hallway, looking absurdly out of place in a navy Italian suit, was a man with grey hair and a severe expression. Behind him stood a massive bodyguard. It wasn't Arthur Vance. It was his chief of staff. She recognized him from the news, Liam Thorne. Sarah opened the door a crack, leaving the chain on. "Can I help you, Ms. Sarah Miller?" Liam asked. His voice was smooth, professional. "Yes, Mr. Arthur Vance would like to speak with you." "I'm not talking to the press," Sarah said quickly. "And if he's suing me for emotional distress to his daughter, I have no money. You can take my toaster." Liam allowed a ghost of a smile to touch his lips. "He is not suing you, Miss Miller. He wants to hire you." Sarah blinked. "What? Please, unchain the door. We have a car waiting." The ride to the Vance estate in the Hamptons took 2 hours by helicopter, which they boarded from a private pad in Manhattan. Sarah sat in silence, looking down at the city. She felt like she was in a dream or a trap. The estate was a fortress, high walls, cameras everywhere. It looked less like a home and more like a compound for a deposed king. They led her into a library that smelled of old paper and cognac. Arthur Vance was standing by the window looking out at the ocean. He turned when she entered. "You're the first person to make her listen since her mother died 4 years ago," Arthur said without preamble. Sarah stood her ground, clutching her cheap purse. "I didn't do anything special, Mr. Vance. I just set a boundary." "I've hired the best child psychologists in the country," Arthur said. walking toward her. "I've hired governesses from the Royal Academy. Chloe broke them all. She set fire to the last one's luggage." "She's grieving," Sarah said quietly. "And she's testing you. She wants to see if you're strong enough to stop her. Because if you can't stop her, you can't protect her. That's how a child's mind works." Arthur stopped. He looked at her sharply. "You're just a waitress. That's what your file says. High school diploma, worked at a diner in Ohio, then came to New York." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. The file. Her fake file. "Yes," she lied. "Just a waitress." Arthur narrowed his eyes. He was a man who built an empire on data. He knew when data didn't add up. "You speak with the diction of the Ivy League," Arthur noted. "Your posture is military grade. And the way you stood in front of that exit, that was tactical positioning. You blocked her escape route without aggression." He took a step closer. "Who are you really, Sarah Miller?" "Does it matter?" Sarah deflected. "You brought me here for a reason. I want you to be her governess, her handler, whatever you want to call it." "No," Sarah said immediately. "I'll pay you $200,000 a year." Sarah paused. That would cover Toby's bills for 5 years. But the risk, if they dug too deep into her past, if they found out why she had changed her name. "No," she said again, though her voice was weaker. "I'm not qualified." $500,000, Arthur said, "and full medical for your brother Tobias at the Neurological Center in Queens. Private room. Top specialists." The air left Sarah's lungs. He knew. Of course he knew. He was Arthur Vance. "That's blackmail," she whispered. "That's leverage," Arthur corrected. "I need someone who can handle my daughter. You are the only candidate. Do we have a deal?" Sarah looked at this powerful, desperate man. She thought of Toby lying in that shared ward, the smell of disinfectant, the doctors saying they needed more tests she couldn't afford. She had been hiding for 3 years, hiding from the scandal that destroyed her life. But for Toby, she would walk back into the fire. "One condition," Sarah said, her voice turning steel-hard again. "Name it." "I run the household regarding Chloe. You don't intervene. If I say she has no phone, she has no phone. If I say she cleans the floor, she cleans the floor. If you undermine me once I walk, and you still pay my brother's medical bills for a year." Arthur Vance extended his hand. "Deal." Moving into the Vance estate was like moving into a museum. It was cold, silent, and beautiful. Sarah was given a suite in the east wing adjacent to Chloe's rooms. Her first night, she didn't sleep. She spent it reviewing the Chloe files Arthur had given her. Report after report of bad behavior. Expulsions from schools. Assaults on staff. It wasn't just bratty behavior. It was systematic destruction. At 7:00 a.m. the next morning, Sarah put on a simple navy blouse and trousers. She walked to Chloe's door. She didn't knock. She opened it. Chloe was asleep in a 4-poster bed that looked like it belonged to Marie Antoinette. The room was a disaster zone, clothes everywhere, half-eaten food on the nightstand, an iPad glowing on the floor. Sarah walked over to the windows and ripped the curtains open. Sunlight flooded the room. "Up," Sarah said. Chloe groaned, pulling the silk duvet over her head. "Get out, I sleep until 10. "Not anymore," Sarah said. She ripped the duvet off the bed. Chloe shrieked, curling into a ball. "I'll tell my dad I'll have you arrested." "Your dad isn't here," Sarah said calmly. "He's in Tokyo for 3 days. It's just you and me." Chloe sat up her hair, a bird's nest, her eyes narrowing. She recognized the waitress. You, the pasta lady. My name is Miss Miller, and you have 10 minutes to get dressed and make your bed. I don't make beds, Chloe spat. That's what maids are for. The maids are banned from your room, Sarah lied effortlessly. Until further notice, you are responsible for your own space. Chloe laughed, a cruel, sharp laugh. You think you're tough. The last nanny left because I put a tarantula in her purse. You won't last a week. Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a chess grandmaster who sees checkmate in 10 moves. Chloe, Sarah said softly, I'm not a nanny, and I don't scare easily. Now, do you want to wear the blue dress or the red one? Because if you're not dressed in 10 minutes, you're going to breakfast in your pajamas, and I've invited the cute boy from the stables to join us for pancakes. Chloe's eyes went wide. The cute boy from the stables, Leo. She had a massive crush on him. You wouldn't, Chloe gasped. 9 minutes, Sarah said, checking her watch. For the first time in years, panic flashed across Chloe Vance's face. She scrambled out of bed. The war had begun. 3 weeks later. The Vance estate was quieter than usual. The staff walked on eggshells, but for a different reason. The screaming had stopped. In the kitchen, Chef Marco was staring at the surveillance monitor in disbelief. Is she actually eating the broccoli? On the screen in the dining room, Chloe Vance was sitting upright. Her elbows were off the table. She was cutting a piece of roasted chicken with precision. Beside her sat Sarah Miller, reading a book, sipping tea, saying nothing. It's witchcraft, whispered the head housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins. The girl hasn't thrown a plate in 20 days. But inside the dining room, the tension was palpable. This wasn't peace. It was a ceasefire. I finished, Chloe said, putting her fork down. Can I have my iPad now? Sarah didn't look up from her book. Did you finish your French homework? Yes. Did you apologize to Mrs. Higgins for tracking mud in the foyer? Chloe grit her teeth. Yes. Then yes, you may have 30 minutes of screen time. Chloe grabbed the device and sprinted out of the room. Sarah watched her go, then let out a long breath she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking slightly. It was exhausting maintaining this facade of absolute authority. Every day was a battle of wills. Later that night, Sarah was in the library, organizing Chloe's schedule. Arthur Vance walked in. He had returned from Tokyo and had been watching the transformation of his household with a mixture of awe and suspicion. You've done the impossible, Arthur said, pouring himself a drink. She's civilized. She's structured, Sarah corrected. She craved boundaries. You were giving her freedom, but to a child, unlimited freedom feels like abandonment. She acted out to see if you cared enough to stop her. Arthur leaned against the mahogany desk. You know a lot about child psychology for a waitress. Sarah stiffened. I read a lot. I did a background check on you, Sarah. Sarah's blood ran cold. She kept her face neutral, turning a page in her notebook. I assumed you would. It came back clean, Arthur said, eyeing her closely. Too clean. Sarah Miller from Ohio. Parents deceased in a car crash. No siblings other than Tobias. High school records, tax returns. It's all there. Perfect. He took a sip of his scotch. But my head of security, Liam, noticed something. Your social security number was issued 3 years ago. You have no digital footprint before 2020. No Facebook from high school. No yearbooks. No ex-boyfriends tagging you in photos. Arthur walked around the desk, invading her personal space. Who are you? I'm the woman fixing your daughter, Sarah said, meeting his gaze. If you want me to leave, say the word. But Chloe has a math test on Friday, and I'm the only one who knows how to explain fractions without making her cry. Arthur stared at her for a long moment. The tension in the room shifted from interrogation to something else, something electric. He saw a strength in her that matched his own. "Fine," Arthur said, backing off. "Keep your secrets, as long as Chloe is happy." He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Oh, and Sarah, there's a gala this Saturday, the chaotic charity event where Chloe threw the vase last year. The board insists we attend to show family stability. You're coming." "I'm staff," Sarah said. "I don't do galas." "You're not just staff anymore," Arthur said. "You're the only thing holding this family together. Buy a dress. Put it on the company card." The gala. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed into a glittering wonderland. Flashbulbs popped like lightning as Arthur Vance stepped onto the red carpet holding Chloe's hand. Chloe looked beautiful in a velvet dress, her hair braided. She wasn't scowling. She wasn't screaming. She smiled shyly at the cameras. Behind them, keeping a respectful distance, walked Sarah. She wore a simple floor-length emerald gown. No jewelry. Minimal makeup. Yet she turned heads. She moved with a liquid grace, her eyes scanning the crowd, analyzing threats, exits, and sightlines. "Is that the new nanny?" a reporter whispered. "She looks like a Bond girl," another muttered. Inside the party was in full swing. Arthur was immediately swarmed by investors and rivals. Chloe stayed close to Sarah, overwhelmed by the noise. "It's loud," Chloe whispered, clutching Sarah's hand. "It's just noise," Sarah soothed. "Focus on the music. The cello. Can you hear it?" Chloe closed her eyes, listening. "Yeah. Good girl." Suddenly, a man approached them. He was tall, with slicked-back blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Julian Thorne, Arthur's biggest business rival and his cousin. "Well, well," Julian sneered. "The little monster is actually out in public. Did you sedate her, Arthur?" Arthur stiffened. "Watch it, Julian." Julian laughed, looking down at Chloe. "I heard you bit a waiter last month. Hungry little wolf." Chloe's face crumpled. The old rage flared in her eyes. She opened her mouth to scream, to lash out. Sarah stepped in. She moved smoothly between Julian and Chloe, creating a physical barrier. "Mr. Thorne," Sarah said, her voice pleasant, but her eyes deadly. "I believe you're confusing Chloe with your own stock prices, volatile and embarrassing." The small circle of people nearby gasped. Julian's smile vanished. "Excuse me. Who is the help to speak to me?" "I'm not the help," Sarah said, stepping closer, lowering her voice so only Julian could hear. "I'm the person who knows about the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the ones registered under your mistress's maiden name. Shell company Blue Heron, right?" Julian's face went white. All the color drained from his cheeks. He looked at Sarah with pure terror. How do you—" "Walk away," Sarah whispered, "or I send the file numbers to the IRS before the dessert course." Julian Thorne turned on his heel and vanished into the crowd. Arthur Vance had watched the exchange from 3 feet away. He hadn't heard what Sarah whispered, but he saw his arrogant, untouchable cousin flee like a frightened dog. He looked at Sarah with wide eyes. "What did you say to him?" "I just reminded him of his manners," Sarah said innocently, smoothing her dress. "Come on, Chloe, let's go look at the Egyptian exhibit." As she walked away, Arthur Vance realized he was in deep trouble. Not because of his daughter, but because he was falling in love with a woman who was clearly A dangerous lie. 2 days later. The peace at the Vance estate was shattered at 3:00 a.m. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed in the hallways. Sarah was awake instantly. She didn't grope for an alarm clock. She rolled out of bed, grabbed a heavy flashlight from her nightstand, and was out the door in 4 seconds. Her first thought was Chloe. She sprinted down the hall to Chloe's room. The door was open. "Chloe!" The bed was empty. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced Sarah's chest. She checked the window. It was broken. Glass on the floor. "Security!" Sarah yelled into her hallway intercom. "Breach in the east wing. Chloe is gone." She ran to the window and looked down. In the moonlight, she saw 2 figures running across the lawn toward the perimeter wall. One was carrying a small bundle over his shoulder. The Vance security team was slow. Too slow. They were reacting to a decoy alarm at the front gate. Sarah didn't wait. She didn't call for backup. She vaulted out of the 2nd-story window, catching a trellis covered in ivy, and slid down, ignoring the thorns tearing at her palms. She hit the grass, running. She wasn't wearing shoes, just pajamas and adrenaline. She cut through the rose garden, moving silently. She intercepted the kidnappers at the back wall. "Hey!" Sarah shouted. The men turned. They were dressed in tactical gear, professionals. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart," the big one grunted, pulling a knife. The man holding Chloe was struggling. Chloe was biting and kicking. "Let me go, Sarah." Sarah didn't pause. She didn't think. The training she had tried to forget took over. The man with the knife lunged. Sarah sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, used his own momentum to twist his arm behind his back, and drove her elbow into his temple. Crack! He dropped like a stone. The second man holding Chloe froze. He reached for a gun in his belt. "Don't," Sarah warned, her voice guttural. He drew the gun. Sarah grabbed a decorative garden stone from the path and hurled it. It struck the man's hand, shattering his fingers. He screamed, dropping the gun and Chloe. Chloe hit the grass and scrambled away. The man lunged for Chloe. Sarah tackled him. They rolled on the wet grass. He was twice her size, heavy and strong. He punched her in the jaw, and she saw stars. But Sarah fought dirty. She gouged his eyes, slammed her palm into his nose, and finally got him in a chokehold. "Who sent you?" she hissed, tightening her grip. "Who sent you?" "Thorne," the man gasped before passing out. "Julian Thorne." Suddenly, floodlights bathed the garden in blinding white light. Security guards swarmed the area, guns drawn. Arthur Vance came running wild-eyed, wearing a silk robe. "Chloe!" "Daddy!" Chloe ran into his arms, sobbing. Arthur held his daughter tight, looking at the scene before him. 2 unconscious men, a gun on the grass, and Sarah Miller, panting blood dripping from her lip, standing over the bodies like a warrior goddess. Arthur walked over to her. He looked at the unconscious mercenaries. He looked at Sarah's hands, bruised but steady. "You took out 2 armed professionals," Arthur said, his voice trembling, "with your bare hands." Sarah wiped the blood from her lip. She knew the game was up. She couldn't pretend to be a waitress anymore. "I had self-defense classes at the YMCA," she tried weakly. "Don't," Arthur said. "Don't lie to me. Not anymore." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Who are you? And don't tell me Sarah Miller." Sarah looked at Chloe, who was safe in the arms of the housekeeper now. She looked at Arthur. "My name," she whispered, "is Agent Elena Ross, former CIA Special Activities Division. I was disavowed 3 years ago. Arthur stared at her. The CIA. I was framed for a mission that went wrong in Damascus. My entire team was killed. I was the only survivor, and they pinned the blame on me to cover up a senator's mistake. I've been running ever since. Sarah Miller was the only way to keep my brother safe. She looked down. I'll pack my bags. The police will be here soon. I can't be here when they run my prints. She turned to walk away. Arthur grabbed her arm. No, he said. Arthur, I'm a fugitive. If I stay, I bring the federal government down on your house. You saved my daughter, Arthur said fiercely. You think I care about the CIA? I have more money than the CIA. He pulled her closer. You're not leaving. Julian Thorne sent these men. He tried to take my child. This is war now, and I need a general. Sarah looked into his eyes. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel hunted. She felt wanted. I charge double for war, she said, a small smirk touching her bloody lip. Arthur smiled back, a dangerous glint in his eye. I'll pay triple. The next morning, the police report stated that 2 intruders had been neutralized by private security during a botched robbery attempt. Money changed hands. Favors were called in. The names of the intruders disappeared from the system. Arthur Vance made sure of it. Inside the estate, the atmosphere had shifted from terror to cold, calculated fury. Eleanor, still Sarah to the staff, sat at the head of the dining table, her laptop open. She was no longer wearing the governess uniform. She wore a sharp black blazer Arthur had had delivered from Manhattan that morning. Arthur sat opposite her. Talk to me, Elena. How do we end him? Julian is sloppy. Elena said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. He's desperate. He tried to kidnap Chloe because he's leveraged to the hilt. He bet against your latest cloud infrastructure launch, and when it succeeded, he lost everything. He needs a ransom to cover his debts to the Russian mob. Arthur's face darkened. He put my daughter in danger for gambling debts. We don't just sue him, Elena said, looking up. Her eyes were icy. We erase him. I've been digging into Blue Heron, the shell company I mentioned at the gala. It's not just tax evasion. He's laundering money for human traffickers. Arthur flinched. Julian is a snake, but human trafficking. He doesn't know the details, likely. He just signs the papers for a fee. But ignorance isn't a defense in federal court. I have the ledger. I hacked his private server an hour ago. She spun the laptop around. I can upload this to the FBI, Interpol, and the New York Times simultaneously. But there's a board meeting at Vance Industries today at noon. Julian will be there trying to oust you for instability due to the robbery at your home. Arthur stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked at this woman, this lethal, brilliant woman who had been serving him coffee for weeks. Get in the car, Arthur said. We're going to the office. Vance Industries HQ, Midtown Manhattan, 12:00 p.m. The boardroom was a glass box in the sky overlooking Central Park. 20 board members in expensive suits sat around the table. Julian Thorne sat at the far end looking smug. He didn't know the kidnapping had failed completely. His men hadn't reported back yet. He assumed chaos reigned at the Vance estate. Arthur walked in. The room went silent. He looked impeccable, unshaken, and walking right beside him was Sarah Miller. Arthur, Julian said, standing up with a fake, compassionate smile. I heard there was a disturbance at your home last night. Shouldn't you be with poor Chloe? Maybe you should step down as CEO. Take a sabbatical. Sit down, Julian, Arthur said. He didn't raise his voice. He sounded like a judge passing a death sentence. Arthur took his seat at the head of the table. Elena stood behind him, placing a single folder on the mahogany surface. This is a motion to remove Julian Thorne from the board, effective immediately, Arthur announced. Julian laughed. On what grounds I own 12% of this company? Eleanor stepped forward. On the grounds of treason, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Julian's eyes bulged. Who is this? The waitress, Arthur. Have you lost your mind? You're letting the help address the board. She's not the help, Arthur said. She's the new head of global security. Elena opened the folder. She slid a photo across the long table. It spun perfectly, stopping right in front of the chairman of the board. It was a photo of Julian meeting with a known mob enforcer. Julian Thorne has been using Vance Industries logistics to transport illegal cargo, Elena stated clearly. He also hired mercenaries to breach the CEO's residence last night. Those mercenaries are currently in a black site, confessing everything on tape. Julian turned pale green. That's a lie. You have no proof. I have the wire transfers, Elena continued relentlessly. I have the emails. I have the GPS data from your phone, placing you at the meeting point. She tapped a key on her tablet, and the large presentation screen on the wall flickered to life. It displayed Julian's bank statements. The room gasped. You're finished, Julian, Arthur said softly. The doors to the boardroom burst open. 4 FBI agents walked in, windbreakers emblazoned with yellow letters. Julian Thorne, the lead agent said. You are under arrest. Julian scrambled back, knocking over his chair. No, it's a setup. It's her. She's a witch. As they dragged him out, kicking and screaming, Julian locked eyes with Elena. You think you're safe, he screamed. I know who you are. I made a call. They know you're here. The ghost is coming for you. The doors slammed shut. The silence in the boardroom was deafening. Arthur stood up. Meeting adjourned. The ride home. In the back of the limousine, the adrenaline faded. Arthur looked at Elena. She was staring out the window, her hand trembling slightly. What did he mean? Arthur asked. When he said the ghost is coming. Elena didn't answer for a long time. Finally, she turned to him. The toughness was gone. She looked vulnerable. The man who framed me. The senator. His code name in the agency was the Ghost. If Julian told him where I am, I have to leave Arthur. Arthur reached across the seat and took her hand. His grip was iron. You're not going anywhere. Arthur, you don't understand. These people wipe out whole villages to keep secrets. I can't be near Chloe. We have resources, Arthur said. We have money. We have power. They have snipers, Eleanor whispered. Arthur pulled her hand to his lips. He kissed her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her breath hitch. Let them come, Arthur said. I'd burn the world down before I let them take you. For the first time in her life, Eleanor Ross wanted to believe in a happy ending. She leaned in, and their lips met. It was a kiss of desperation, of relief, of a promise made in the shadow of a storm. 1 week later. Life had returned to a strange, wonderful normal. Chloe was thriving. She had started piano lessons and miraculously hadn't insulted the teacher once. She adored Miss Sarah. She didn't know about the CIA or the fight in the garden. She just knew Sarah made her feel safe. But Elena was not safe. She barely slept. She spent her nights watching the security monitors, upgrading the estate's perimeter defenses, checking the encrypted channels she used to monitor agency chatter. It was Tuesday evening. Rain was falling again, just like the night she met the Vances. Eleanor was in the kitchen making hot chocolate for Chloe. She glanced at the monitor on the counter. A black delivery van had just pulled up to the service gate. Elena frowned. No deliveries were scheduled after 5:00 p.m. She zoomed in on the license plate. It was muddy obscured. She typed the partial number into her database. Result: stolen vehicle. Reported 2 hours ago. "Chloe!" Elena shouted, her voice echoing through the house. Chloe ran into the kitchen. "What is it? Is the cocoa ready?" "Game time," Elena said, her face grim. "Code red, just like we practiced. Go to the panic room. Take your dad. Now." "But Daddy is on a conference call." "Drag him," Elena ordered. She grabbed a ceramic knife from the block metal detectors, wouldn't pick it up, but it was sharp enough to cut through Kevlar. As Chloe ran toward the study, the lights in the house cut out. Darkness swallowed the estate. The backup generators didn't kick in. They had been sabotaged. Eleanor moved into the shadows of the hallway. She heard the front door breach a quiet hydraulic hiss. Not a smash. These were professionals, top tier. The kind the senator sent when he wanted a problem to disappear without a trace. She counted footsteps. 3 sets. Heavy boots. "Clear left," a voice whispered. "Target is female. Blonde. Eliminate on sight. No witnesses." Elena's heart pounded, but her mind was calm. This was her world. She slipped into the library. She knew the layout of the house better than anyone. She waited behind a heavy velvet curtain. The beam of a tactical flashlight swept the room. A soldier stepped in, his weapon suppressed. Elena didn't hesitate. She stepped out, wrapped the curtain around his head to blind him, and kicked his knee backward. He went down with a grunt. She snatched his sidearm from his holster and pistol-whipped him into unconsciousness. 1 down, 2 to go. She moved into the corridor. She saw the other 2 heading toward the panic room. They were setting an explosive charge on the door. Arthur and Chloe were in there. "Hey!" Elena yelled. The men turned. Elena fired. Bang! Bang! She hit one in the shoulder, spinning him around. The other returned fire. Bullets chewed up the drywall next to her head. She dove behind a marble statue of a Greek god. "It's Ross!" the soldier shouted. "Flank her!" Elena checked the magazine. 4 rounds left. She was outgunned. She needed a distraction. She looked up at the chandelier hanging above the intruders. It was massive, crystal heavy. The release winch was on the wall behind them. She couldn't reach it. Suddenly, a shot rang out from the other end of the hall. The soldier standing violently jerked and fell. Elena peeked out, shocked. Arthur Vance was standing at the end of the hall, holding a hunting rifle. He looked terrified, but he was standing his ground. "Get away from my family!" Arthur roared. The last soldier, the one Eleanor had wounded, raised his weapon toward Arthur. "Arthur, get down!" Eleanor screamed. She broke cover. She sprinted across the open floor. The soldier turned his gun toward her. Time seemed to slow down. Elena saw the muzzle flash. She felt a sledgehammer hit her chest. She didn't stop. She crashed into the soldier, tackling him to the ground. She jammed her pistol under his chin. "Who sent you?" she screamed. "The senator." The man laughed, blood bubbling in his teeth. "The senator is dead. He died this morning." Elena froze. What? This isn't a sanction, the man wheezed. It's a cleanup. We're scrubbing the whole unit. You and the records, all gone. Elena knocked him out. She sat back on her heels, gasping for air. Her chest burned. She looked down. Her blouse was torn, revealing the Kevlar vest she had been wearing under her clothes for a week. The bullet was lodged in the weave, right over her heart. It would leave a massive bruise, but she was alive. Arthur ran to her, dropping the rifle. He fell to his knees, his hands shaking as he touched her face. Eleanor, are you hit? Vest. She coughed. I'm okay. Arthur pulled her into a crushing hug. He was sobbing. The billionaire who controlled the world had been reduced to a terrified man holding the woman he loved. You idiot, Elena whispered into his shoulder. You came out of the panic room. You were out here, Arthur said. I couldn't leave you. Suddenly the lights flickered back on. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real police this time. Elena pulled away. Arthur, listen to me. The senator is dead. This was a rogue cleanup crew. If we survive this night, the threat is gone. The chain of command is broken. We survived, Arthur said firmly. We won. But Elena looked at the destruction around them. Not yet. The police will ask questions. I have a dead body in the library and 3 unconscious men in the hall. My prints are in the system. Arthur Vance stood up, helping her to her feet. He smoothed his silk robe, regaining his composure. The mask of the billionaire slid back into place. Let me handle the police, Arthur said. You go to Chloe. She needs you. Arthur, they'll arrest me. No, Arthur said, his eyes gleaming with a power that frightened even her. They won't, because as of this moment, Sarah Miller doesn't exist, and Elena Ross died 3 years ago in Damascus. He picked up the phone. Get me the president, Arthur said to the operator. Yes, wake him up. Tell him Arthur Vance is calling to discuss his re-election campaign funding and a small favor regarding a pardon. The aftermath. The sun rose over the Vance estate, illuminating shattered glass and trampled rose bushes. But inside the library, a different kind of restructuring was taking place. The police had come and gone. The official report was filed, private security incident. No charges filed. Classified under national security protocols. Arthur Vance sat behind his desk, the phone receiver resting in its cradle. He looked exhausted, lines of age deepening around his eyes. But he had never looked more powerful. He had spent 4 hours negotiating with the highest levels of the United States government. He traded 3 major defense contracts and a significant donation to the president's library for one thing: a ghost. Elena sat on the leather sofa holding an ice pack to her chest. The Kevlar bruise was spreading a dark purple blossom over her heart. It's done, Arthur said, his voice raspy. The file on Agent Elena Ross has been deleted. The file on Sarah Miller has been legitimized. You have a birth certificate, a social security number, and a passport. You are a consultant for Vance Industries. You exist. Elena closed her eyes, letting the tears finally fall. For 3 years she had been a phantom jumping at shadows, unable to use a credit card or sign a lease. And Julian, she asked. Julian Thorne pled guilty to federal racketeering charges an hour ago, Arthur said with a grim satisfaction. My lawyers made it clear that if he didn't, we would release the evidence of his human trafficking to the general population at Rikers Island. He chose prison over death. He'll never see the outside of a cell again. The door creaked open. Chloe stood there. She was still wearing her pajamas, clutching a stuffed bear she hadn't touched in years. She looked small, shaken, but her eyes were clear. She walked past her father and went straight to Elena. "You're a spy," Chloe whispered. Elena lowered the ice pack. She didn't lie. She didn't sugarcoat it. She treated the girl with the respect she deserved. "I was. A long time ago." "Did you kill bad guys?" "Yes." "Did you save us?" "I tried." Chloe nodded slowly. She climbed onto the sofa and tucked herself under Elena's arm, careful of the bruise. "You're not a waitress," Chloe decided. "You're a warrior, like Mulan." Arthur watched them, the two most important people in his world. He realized then that his money hadn't saved his family. His influence hadn't saved his family. The woman sitting on his couch who had scrubbed floors and endured his daughter's tantrums without complaint had saved them. "Chloe," Arthur said gently. "Sarah, Elena, is going to stay for good, but things are going to be different. She isn't the governess anymore." Chloe looked up at Elena. "Then what is she?" Elena looked at Arthur. The question hung in the air, heavy with unsaid promises. "She's my partner," Arthur said. "In everything." 6 months later. The wedding was small. No press, no paparazzi helicopters. Just 50 close friends and family in the restored rose garden. Elena wore white, but not a traditional gown. It was a sleek, modern suit of ivory silk. She refused to wear a veil. She was done hiding her face. When the officiant asked for the rings, it was Chloe who stepped forward. She was dressed in blue, standing tall, her chin up. She handed the rings to her father with a grace that silenced the crowd. The unbreakable brat was gone. In her place was a young girl who had learned discipline, courage, and loyalty from the best teacher in the world. As Arthur kissed his bride, the applause didn't feel like polite society etiquette. It felt like relief. It felt like victory. At the reception, Arthur took the microphone. "They say you can't handle a Vance," Arthur said, looking at his daughter and his new wife. "And they were right. I couldn't be handled. Chloe couldn't be handled. We were a storm looking for a place to crash." He raised his glass to Elena. "But then a waitress dropped a napkin on the floor and told us to pick it up. She didn't just handle us. She healed us. To Eleanor, the only power I will ever bow to." Elena smiled, her hand resting on Arthur's, her other hand holding Chloe's. She wasn't looking at the exits anymore. She wasn't counting threats. For the first time in a decade, the soldier was at peace. 10 years later, New York City. The charity gala at the Met was even more lavish than the one a decade prior. The flashbulbs were blinding. A limousine pulled up. The door opened. A young woman stepped out. She was 20 years old now. Tall, striking with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Chloe Vance. She was currently a sophomore at Harvard Law, top of her class, and the youngest board member in the history of Vance Industries. The press called her the Iron Princess. She walked the red carpet with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, but was tempered by a steely discipline. Reporters shouted questions. "Chloe, is it true you're taking over the Asia division? Chloe?" "What about the rumors of the merger?" She ignored them all until she reached the top of the stairs. She turned back to wait for her parents. Arthur Vance, now grey-haired but still imposing, helped Eleanor out of the car. Elena looked ageless. She moved with the same predatory grace, her eyes scanning the crowd out of habit. They joined Chloe at the top of the stairs. "You're late," Chloe said, checking her watch. "Punctuality is the courtesy of kings, remember," Eleanor laughed. "I remember teaching you that while you were scrubbing grout with a toothbrush. A lesson I haven't forgotten." Chloe smirked. Inside the party was a bore. The same people, the same gossip. Chloe found herself cornered by a young, arrogant hedge fund manager named Brad. "So, Chloe," Brad said, swirling his drink, "I hear you play chess. Pretty cute hobby. My dad hired a grandmaster to tutor me. Maybe I could give you a few pointers." Chloe looked at him. She saw the condescension. She saw the underestimate. "There's a board in the library," Chloe said smoothly. "One game. If you win, I'll have dinner with you. If I win, you donate $100,000 to the Veterans Rehabilitation Fund." Brad laughed. "Easy money. You're on." A crowd gathered in the library. Brad played aggressively, moving his pieces with a flourish. Chloe played silently. She played the way Elena had taught her, defensively patiently, waiting for the opponent to overextend. 10 minutes in, Brad was sweating. 15 minutes in, he was pale. Chloe picked up her queen. She looked at Brad, and for a second, she looked exactly like the waitress who had stood in a diner 10 years ago and commanded a billionaire to listen. "Checkmate," Chloe said, placing the piece down with a soft click. The crowd erupted. Brad stared at the board, humiliated. Arthur and Elena were watching from the doorway. "She plays just like you," Arthur whispered to his wife. "No." Elena smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "She plays better. She doesn't play to survive, Arthur. She plays to win." They watched their daughter collect the check from the stunned banker. Chloe Vance wasn't a brat. She wasn't a victim. She was a queen. And she had been forged by the waitress who did the impossible. And that is the story of how a simple act of discipline changed the fate of an empire. It reminds us that true power isn't about money, status, or fear. True power is the ability to stand your ground when the world tells you to move. Sarah or Elena didn't need $1 billion to command respect. She just needed self-worth and the courage to say no to entitlement. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many of us are underestimating the quiet people in the room? How many waitresses are actually warriors in disguise, just waiting for the right moment to reveal their strength? What did you think of Elena's secret? Did you suspect she was CIA, or did you think she was just a strict nanny? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single theory. If you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and hidden identities, please do me a huge favor. Smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a story. We have a massive mafia revenge saga coming up next week that you do not want to miss. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you underestimate. I'll see you in the next video.